So my name is Brennan Bloomer. I am the CEO of Block One. Block One is the primary development group or core development team behind the EOS project. EOS is a decentralized autonomous organization that allows you to build decentralized autonomous organizations on top of that foundation. But I want to talk a little bit about DACs in general today. Before I jump into it, just for my lawyers, EOS.io software will be a free product and a development platform the developers can use to develop, run, and govern decentralized applications. The ongoing EOS ERC20 token distribution is not available to U.S. citizens, residents, or entities, and no information regarding the ongoing token distribution will be provided to discuss this event. I'll do my best to answer any questions, but a lot of we have gotten a lot of questions in the past about why are you guys here in the United States? Why are you talking to U.S. developers if they can't partake in the token sale? It's important to understand that EOS is a free product, and you do not need tokens to run your applications, just like a developer doesn't need to have servers in order to host their applications. They can be rented, and it isn't required for them to make huge hardware investments in order to run their applications. EOS is the same way, and the largest and most innovative development community in blockchain is here in the United States. And although we received, we used Debevoise and Plimpton, I echo the sentiment of using good lawyers. We use Emma Channing. Our lawyers were in contact with the SEC on how to evaluate these things before we even launched. And while EOS is not a security, there is a lot of legislation in the United States, such as here in New York City, bit license. If I wanted to essentially issue a token to everyone in the audience to use the blockchain as a ticket just to get into this conference, I would need to acquire a bit license. So there's some misinformed regulation in the United States, Washington State and stuff, that makes it very difficult for teams to actually allow US participation, even if they are deemed not a security. And that's why, unfortunately, the EOS token sale is not available to US citizens. So I want to talk a little bit about the incumbent model that dominates NASDAQ today, which is centralized technology platforms. And they all kind of look the same. So you got value creators over here, value extractors. In the case of Uber, we would say, these are the drivers. You have riders over there. They're sending their information to a central server. And most of the time, all the time, there's shareholders or beneficiaries at the top who are unrelated to these parties, and they're using the platform to extract profit. This is the most common model, as I mentioned, in the Fortune 500 today. All centralized technology platforms generally fit into a model very similar to this. The problem is that you have misaligned interests. The users and the beneficiaries are not the same people, and profit is the only thing that bridges them together. The other problem that we really have here is that you have no user vested interest. So the riders and everyone, they don't really care about the health of the platform. They just care about their segment. They want to get from point A to point B. They want to get paid, and even shareholders, for the most part, are really at this stage pretty programmed to look at dividends, look at growth, these types of things. And there's no one really left except for the core team, which is a relatively small group of people that actually care about the health of the organization. 2014, Dan Larimer, our business partner, he was the inventor of delegated proof of stake. The concept of the DAO released this idea of decentralized autonomous collectives. Decentralized autonomous collectives are basically an organization that uses the blockchain to empower open-sourced code, right? We've all heard software is eating the world, right? We've heard open source, programming dynamics are becoming, creating exponential growth. People can pick off where one left off. Well, what the blockchain is able to do is augment these open source organizations so that these groups, these open source communities, can actually create competitive forces with existing centralized entities. You still have your value creators over here and your value extractors, but the central component is completely replaced with open source code. So if we take a look at an Uber model, right, you'd have drivers and riders, but then you would use essentially an open source formula in which anyone could contribute to add value to how that company operated. And tokens would bridge the economic gap between everything else. And this means that you have complete transparency on how the company is functioning, right? You have it completely auditable, so you can see everything that's going on, completely trustworthy, and it's 100% inclusive. Meaning anyone in the world can wake up, audit your code, right, and start adding value. It literally turns the entire world into a potential employee force. This completely aligns users and beneficiaries. It creates a complete alignment of interests of all the parties involved, leverages a pool of massive, innovative talent. And what it does at the end of the day is it creates unprecedented vested interest. How does a centralized entity with 50 or even 100 or even 1,000 shareholders compete with an open source organization with potentially millions of people waking up every day saying this is the next best thing? When people are holding these tokens and drivers and riders are all aligned on the health of the platform anytime they're exposed to that token. It's creating essentially companies that have millions of people working for them, and they're only paying them when they add value to the project, right? And everyone using the project cares about the health of the entire organization at all times. This is creating groups or organizations in which centralized entities will no longer be able to remain competitive with various types of, with specific models. Centralized technology platforms are the first to go. I want to take a look at some examples. Steemit is a phenomenal one. Steemit is, how many of you, has anyone heard of Steemit in here? Okay, great. So Steemit was my business partner's second project. It is content on the blockchain. So what you're actually viewing when you look at Steemit is actually just a block explorer. This is just a window into the blockchain itself. In fact, anyone else can create a competitor to Steemit.com. What we're realizing with blockchains is that the UI layer, right, is actually becoming something that anyone can compete with. They can create, social engineer the data in any way possible, and the best UI will win. But behind Steemit.com is the Steem blockchain, and that is all the content on it. Now, the blockchain is able to mint new tokens, and it subsidizes the acquisition of content for everyone writing on the platform. And when people write on the platform, and you get likes and other people value this content, you're rewarded based on how valuable the community decided that content was, right? This is over time, it creates censorship resistance, it creates inclusiveness, it creates essentially the ultimate referral program. Steem was designed, built, launched, and had 100,000 users per day in less than 6 months. I have been a venture capital for a long period of time. My past was in virtual currencies, real estate, and venture capital. I have taken a look at when I first got involved in this project, I've never seen exponential compounding growth for search engine optimization the way that I've seen it with these companies. And it's because of the unbelievable vested interest behind them. So I want to talk a little bit about tokens, because tokens are the network. A lot of people say, why would we want these tokens? Well, and I heard a little bit people talking about, some people, they find a good use for the blockchain, but the token doesn't really make sense. This is a very good point. A lot of things don't actually need tokens, but the things that do really need them. A good network will, in addition to giving you network access, so the token will have utility or give you some type of beneficial interest in the community or weighted interest in the community, you should be nominating or electing the block producers. Every single blockchain is a government, right? Meaning it's a governance structure that exists. It needs to be managed. You look at Bitcoin, you're looking at a governance structure where the miners are the law, right? And code is contract. You're looking at Ethereum structures where the mining pools and the Ethereum Foundation are law. All these things are governments that we adhere to, and this gets into proof of stake and proof of work a little bit. But network emissions and allocation. Some of these things that we can do with tokens are pretty phenomenal. So as I mentioned, the blockchain can subsidize activities, right? In EOS, for example, 5% new tokens are issued at the end of each year on a continuous ongoing basis. So if we take a look at the inflation that exists with Bitcoin and Ethereum today, we're spending about $6 billion on processing transactions, less than 25 transactions per second. When you actually break that cost up, we're really looking at 10 to 15 US dollars per transaction before additional minor fees. So these proof of work machines are extremely wasteful, but when we start taking that money and we start deploying it in ways that can actually really build value to the ecosystem, it allows the token holders, the proof of stake token holders, to start to channel money into collective benefit contracts. So one example is that I could put a contract that says I will do marketing for the project, I will do this, I will do that, and if the token holders voted for me, I would start to receive proceeds or start to receive the newly minted tokens the way that miners do in proof of work blockchain. I could also propose that we just destroy them, and that would eliminate the inflation per network, the 5% annual inflation. I could also build a decentralized organization on top of EOS or on top of a DAO itself. What would happen if we took the $5 billion a year that are being spent on mining and electricity, redundant and copious amounts? Remember, 5 years ago, we spent a couple $100,000 on mining. Now we spend $6 billion, and we have no additional performance to show for it, right? Bitcoin and Ethereum are the largest ICOs that exist today, right? Bitcoin's taking in $8 million a day, and Ethereum's taking in about $6, and we are burning every single resource that people are giving to us. What happens when we take those and the miners start creating DAOs in which the money disseminates all the way down to the base layer, so billions of dollars are reaching the innovators, the entrepreneurs that are actually building on these platforms? I believe once we start transferring money down to that level, we're going to start to see growth in this space that is in line with how much resources the community is giving us. But this just gives a little bit of idea of a proper token network. Tokens should have utility. Tokens should have, every blockchain is a voting machine. So whenever you look at and assess a blockchain, ask yourself, who's voting? As a token holder, are you voting, right? Or are other people voting for you? Are miners voting for you, right? Is a centralized entity voting for you? And I really encourage everyone to examine the token, understand what's going on, because a lot of these projects hide behind the guise of complexity, when actually it's very simple. A lot of things that are being done, these are lessons we've learned before. We can understand very basic fundamental principles. But a proper token network should have your involvement, and it should have your control. And it should deliver basically all of that to the token holders themselves. A good network cannot survive without its token holders. Anyway, that's just a little bit of an overview on decentralized autonomous corporations. I'm a big believer that starting with centralized technology platforms, we're going to see the disruption of virtually everything by open source organizations, because I don't think that they can remain competitive versus communities that leverage open source dynamics and have the blockchain to give it the teeth it needs to actually start penetrating into mainstream society. Any questions? Yes.
You mentioned that Ethereum is a large ICO. Like I take a issue of that because I think at the end they raised $70 million when they launched the tokens. You guys raised $400 million today, and I'm trying to understand if you talk about transparency and being auditable and clear understanding where the money is going. I'm a little puzzled about, like, they have $400 million but there's no product. You have a person on the panel before that say, oh, we have to focus on product, focus on product. Like 20 minutes is talking about how you have to focus on product. Yet you have a white paper, no product. And
so let me stop you because
$400 million spent on what?
Yeah. So thank you. First off, to address segment your question. The way that we issue tokens is exactly the same way as Bitcoin and Ethereum. They are ICOs. Every day new tokens are created. People pay for those tokens, and they come in the form of dilution. EOS works exactly the same way. We are a virtual mining process. We just aren't wasting all of that money on electricity because we don't require it, right? We're able to perform at much higher levels without the need for that much infrastructure. EOS is much more than a project, and that's why we've raised $400 million so far. You can already download the testnet and start running it on a local node. We have the testnet September 14th, and the reason we're doing so well is because people are in the code working on it. We've received hundreds of companies that are already focused on building on it or switching to it. Now, I believe in a little bit of a different model in terms of creating DAOs than traditional people do. A lot of people have created entities that require a ton of centralized dependence, like the Ethereum Foundation itself. And what that means is that you're never really a DAO because you have this dependence on any individual entity, et cetera. The way that we've done it, we look at it as a publisher. Block One is a publisher. So we look at DAOs very much like big online video games, right? So it's a technological framework that you put into a community. The community then takes that framework and it produces positive externalities, right? Now, we have just begun the raise. We're only 45 days in, and we're not a group that rushes to just announce things haphazardly. If you take a look at who our partners are, Blockchain Capital, Fenbushi, In Blockchain, really some of the biggest veterans in the space, we are preparing a program that's going to do a lot more with the capital we've raised than just our own capital. We're working on, and this is the first time I'm talking about this in public, but we're working with some of these groups to leverage that capital up and drive the money back down to the entrepreneur level. Now, I can't go into too many details yet, but what I would caution or urge you to is have a little bit of patience. We're not going to run out there and just announce everything very, very quickly. We're not even 2 months into this process. But what I can assure you is that some very big, large things are coming. We believe in that transparency. We're working, we're more eager than just about anyone to get that information out there and to start announcing these things. But it's not something that we can do quickly with so many parties involved, signing legal documentation, et cetera. So we'll get there, but we're not quite there yet. Yes?
So EOS is a new blockchain.
Correct.
There are a lot of blockchains coming up and popping up. Someone earlier talked about blockchain cross-communication.
Yep.
So the question is, where do you see the space evolving in terms of the number of blockchains popping up, and more importantly, where do you see EOS in that space? Like, what do you see EOS popping up at the top and being one of the dominant blockchains, or do you see EOS working?
Yes. So the question was, there's a lot of blockchains. Where do you see EOS in that sphere? I do think that there's a lot of blockchains. I think that very few will gather the community required in order to create critical mass to really build on these things. There's only really 2 large communities that exist today, and that is the BitShares Steem EOS community and the Ethereum community itself. So I think that in combination with technology, you need a large community. On the technology level, EOS is really the only project that can deliver a lot of the requirements that people are looking for. When you're dealing with public blockchains, right, which is designed to have every business in the world build on that same blockchain that has a limited single-threaded throughput, right, of 20 transactions per second. The reason Silicon Valley isn't building on Ethereum is because they know what they're doing. And when you look at tons of different businesses jumping on here, you realize not even one small business can scale on this, right? So what we need to build a platform, first and foremost, in a horizontal scalability, and the only way you achieve that is with parallelism. We need to be able to add a new chain when one fills and have it add to the aggregated resources of the blockchain itself. EOS is the first project to do that. You'll see other projects like Tezos and some of these other things that are built on Dan's technology, a form of delegated proof of stake. But these projects don't have the community and they don't have the parallelism required in order to really realize the vision of a public blockchain that can support millions, potentially billions of transactions per second. EOS is the first project that can do that on a technical level, and it is the only project that has the community required in order to start getting the critical mass effects as of right now. Any other questions? All right, thank you guys very much.